Lena sat by the window of her small apartment, the morning sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows on the floor. She couldn't see the light itself, but she could feel it, its warmth on her skin, its quiet presence in the room. She had never been able to see the world like others could. Blind since birth, Lena had navigated through life with the aid of her other senses, and most importantly, with the help of her constant companion and guide, Max. Max was a large, sturdy golden retriever, his fur a rich shade of gold that glistened in the sun. But to Lena, Max was more than just a dog, he was her lifeline. From the moment he had been placed in her hands as a puppy, their bond had been inseparable. She had trained him herself, learning to trust his instincts as he had learned to trust hers. They had become a team, two beings navigating through the world together, with Max always by her side. "All right, Max. Let's go," Lena said, her voice calm but firm. Max's ears perked up at the sound of her voice, and he patted over to her with a gentle wag of his tail. His nose nudged her hand, and she smiled, even though she couldn't see the warm expression on his face. Max had always been attuned to her every need, understanding the slightest change in her mood or the smallest hesitation in her step. His presence was a constant reassurance. He was her eyes, her guide, and her companion in a world that, though invisible to her, felt alive with its own unique rhythms and sounds. Lena stood up from the chair, and Max immediately moved into position beside her. She placed her hand lightly on his harness, the familiar leather strap cool beneath her fingers. "Lead the way, Max," she murmured, her words filled with trust. Max's tail wagged in response, and he began to walk forward, his steps measured and steady. Lena moved with him, her senses attuned to the world around them through the sounds and vibrations of her environment. The sound of traffic in the distance, the chatter of people walking by, and the subtle change in the air as they passed through the door of their apartment building. Max's movements were precise. He knew the rhythm of the world, from the texture of the pavement underfoot to the precise moments when they needed to pause at a curb. Lena relied on him completely, never questioning his decisions because he had never once steered her wrong. They had been through so much together, busy streets, unfamiliar locations, even moments of danger, and Max had always been there, guiding her with unwavering loyalty and care. As they reached the corner of the street, Max halted, his body stiffening as he sensed an approaching vehicle. Lena, trained in the subtle shifts of the air around her, also stopped. She heard the distant hum of an engine, growing closer. "Not yet," she whispered, and Max remained still, his eyes focused ahead. After a few moments, the car passed by, and Lena felt the familiar pressure of the harness guiding her forward once more. They continued their walk through the city, the world around them vibrant with sounds. Lena could hear the chirping of birds in the trees, the laughter of children playing in the park, and the occasional greeting from familiar faces she had met during her many walks. It was a quiet but fulfilling existence. The connection between her and Max was deep, built over years of shared moments and mutual understanding. Max was more than just her guide dog, he was her protector, her best friend, and the one constant in her life. There was a deep, unspoken communication between them that went beyond words. On this particular morning, as Lena and Max made their way toward the coffee shop on the corner, Lena felt an unusual unease settle within her. Max had been acting slightly more alert than usual, his head swiveling back and forth as they walked. He was still guiding her with his usual skill, but his movements had a sharper edge to them, as though he sensed something Lena couldn't yet place. "Max?" Lena asked softly, her fingers gently brushing against his harness as they walked. "What's going on?" Max didn't respond in any way that she could understand, but his pace quickened just a little, and his tail stopped wagging. This wasn't normal. Something was amiss. They reached the coffee shop, and Max led Lena to the door, but as she reached for the handle, she noticed that the usually bustling cafe was eerily silent. The sounds of chatter and the clinking of cups were absent, replaced by a deep, unsettling quiet. "Max," Lena murmured again, her voice tinged with concern. Max stayed still for a moment, his ears flicking in response to some distant sound she couldn't identify. Then, with a soft nudge, he guided her back slightly, stepping away from the door. "Not today, huh?" Lena said, a hint of amusement in her voice, though she couldn't shake the feeling of tension in the air. Max had steered her away, but why? Just as she was about to reconsider her route, a voice from inside the coffee shop broke the silence.
Lena? Is that you?
It was the voice of Ben, the barista she had come to know well over the months. His voice was full of confusion but also concern.
You might want to stay away for a bit. There's been a bit of a situation inside. Lena's heart skipped a beat. What happened?
I'm not sure, Ben replied, his voice wavering. But I think there was a gas leak or something.
We're waiting for the fire department to clear it. Lena let out a slow breath.
Thank you for letting me know, she said, her voice steady. Max, you were right. Max's tail gave a soft, approving wag, as though pleased with his decision.
Lena smiled, grateful for his instincts.
She would never have known there was any danger inside the shop if not for Max's careful guidance. Let's try the park today, Lena suggested, turning back toward the street.
We can get our coffee from there.
Max began walking again, his steps slow and deliberate. The rest of their walk through the city was uneventful, but Lena could feel the weight of their bond more deeply today. Max had not only guided her away from danger, but he had also protected her in a way that words could never express. It was moments like this that made her grateful for their partnership. Lena and Max arrived at the park a little later, their journey interrupted by the brief encounter at the coffee shop, but the park was their peaceful refuge. The soft rustling of leaves in the trees, the scent of fresh grass, and the distant sound of children playing were all the proof Lena needed that the world, though invisible to her, was still alive with activity and joy. Max led her to a bench near the fountain, where she often liked to sit and enjoy the warmth of the sun. She could hear the soft splashing of water as the fountain bubbled peacefully, and the smell of fresh flowers lingered in the air. As she sat down, Max lowered himself onto the ground beside her, resting his head on her lap. Lena ran her fingers through his fur, the familiar texture of his coat soothing her. It was moments like these that reminded her just how much she relied on Max, not just for navigating the physical world, but for the emotional comfort he provided. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the world around her and reflecting on how far they had come. When she was younger, she had struggled with the idea of being different, of needing someone else to guide her through life. But now, with Max by her side, it no longer felt like a burden, it felt like a blessing. Max wasn't just her guide dog, he was her partner in navigating a world that was both challenging and beautiful. And as she rested there, her fingers gently tracing the contours of Max's ears, Lena knew that their bond was something rare, something that went beyond the simple relationship between a woman and her dog. It was a connection born of trust, understanding, and the quiet moments they shared, walking through the world together. Thank you, Max, Lena whispered softly, her voice full of affection. Max's tail thumped gently on the ground in response, and Lena couldn't help but smile, even though she couldn't see the way his eyes sparkled in the sun. Together, they had found their way through the darkness and into the light. The sun hung low in the sky as the afternoon drifted toward evening. Lena and Max had spent the last few hours in the park, enjoying the quiet peace of the green space. For Lena, the park was a sanctuary where the world, though invisible to her, felt alive with sounds and sensations. It was here that she had learned to truly appreciate the harmony of life, birds singing in the trees, children's laughter echoing in the distance, the steady rhythm of Max's breathing beside her. But even in the most tranquil places, the world had its surprises. Max had already sensed something before Lena did. Lena had been lost in the peaceful rhythm of the park when she felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Max had been standing, his head turned toward the tree line, his body tense, muscles rippling under his golden coat. It wasn't like him to act this way unless something was off. Max? Lena called softly, her voice gentle but insistent. What is it, boy? Max's tail was still, and his ears were flat against his head, a clear signal that something was amiss. Lena instinctively stood, her senses alert. She could feel the subtle tremor in the air, like a change in pressure, though she couldn't see the source. Was there a storm coming? A threat of some kind? Max's nostrils flared, and he gave a low growl, something she had never heard him do before. She could feel his body shift into a protective stance beside her. Max, Lena began again, her heart racing. The sharpness of Max's warning was enough to rattle her, and she grasped the harness more firmly.
Without a word, Max tugged slightly at the harness, as if urging her to move. It wasn't the usual gentle pull to guide her down a path, it was insistent. Urgent. Okay, Max. Let's go. Lena didn't question him, her voice steady despite the rising unease in her chest. She trusted him more than she could ever trust herself. They started to walk briskly through the park, but Lena could feel the distance between them and the world around them growing, as though the air itself had thickened. She could hear distant voices now, more than one person, raised in alarm, their tones sharp with distress. But no matter how hard she listened, she couldn't make out the words. Max's lead was firm and purposeful, and Lena followed, not questioning, just trusting. She felt the subtle change in the ground beneath her feet, faster-paced footsteps, the unevenness of the gravel path beneath her shoes. Max knew. He was leading her somewhere, and for the first time, she wasn't sure where that was. As they approached the edge of the park, Lena's pulse quickened. She could feel the tension in the air, and it was more than just Max's unease. Something was happening. Something was wrong. The sounds of shouting grew louder, and she could hear the frantic beat of sirens in the distance. Max abruptly stopped, and Lena nearly stumbled over her own feet in the abrupt halt. She felt a roughness beneath her hand as Max's body became stiff, as though he was bracing himself for something unseen. A new sound reached her ears, footsteps rushed and uneven, approaching from the same direction they had come. "Max, what's going on?" she whispered, but the dog remained rigid. In that moment, Lena's mind flashed with the memory of what had happened in the coffee shop earlier. A gas leak. Was something similar going on here? Was the park in danger? Was there a fire? The warning signs were building, but without the clarity of sight, Lena couldn't piece it all together. And then, a voice broke through the fog of confusion. "Lena!" It was Ben, the barista from the coffee shop. Lena recognized the urgency in his tone. She tensed, unsure of what was happening. "Lena, we need to get out of here. There's been an accident. A man collapsed near the pond, and there's a chemical spill. The park is being evacuated." Lena's heart skipped a beat. Her breath caught in her throat. "An accident?" she repeated, trying to make sense of his words. "Max." "Max's instinct is right," Ben said, stepping closer. "You've got to get to safety. The authorities are coming, but the air's too dangerous near the spill." Max was already pulling at the leash, tugging her away from the path. Lena followed without hesitation, knowing she was placing her trust entirely in him. "Come on, Max," she said, her voice firm but anxious. "Lead me out." The park was a place she knew well, but now, everything felt unfamiliar. The usual comforting sounds of children playing and the wind rustling through the trees had been replaced by the distant wail of sirens and the murmur of people in motion. Max was guiding her with a calm authority that kept her grounded. Despite the rising panic around them, Max remained focused. He knew the way, he knew how to protect her. They reached the gates of the park, the sound of sirens growing louder, and Lena could hear the hum of activity, a mix of police officers, fire trucks, and paramedics working quickly. Ben was still close behind, his presence a small comfort, though Lena was focused solely on Max. "You're okay, Lena," Ben said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The authorities are on their way to clean up. We'll get you somewhere safe. You're all right now." Lena nodded, but her focus was entirely on Max. Max had stopped in his tracks, his eyes now fixed ahead of them. Lena could sense his stillness, the way he surveyed the scene, making sure there was no immediate threat. "Thank you, Max," Lena whispered. She could feel the bond between them more strongly than ever. Max was not just her guide but her protector. In a world that she couldn't see, he was her eyes, her strength, and her guardian angel. Later that evening, after the park was cleared and Lena had been escorted safely back to her apartment by Ben, she sank into the familiar embrace of her couch, Max resting beside her. The events of the day weighed heavily on her heart, but her trust in Max had only deepened. She stroked his fur, the steady rhythm of his breathing calming her. "We made it through today, didn't we, boy?" she murmured. Max's tail thumped on the floor, a soft acknowledgement. He was always there, always the steady presence in her life, even in the most uncertain moments.
As the night settled around them, Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude. Even when the world seemed to fall apart, Max was there, guiding her through the darkness with unwavering faith and love. And as she sat there, surrounded by the soft hum of the city outside, Lena knew no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always have Max by her side. They had faced the unknown together, and together, they would continue to navigate the world.